Last weekend saw my first ever race in a car, and I got a lot more than I bargained for. I had multiple mechanical failures, a few scary moments, and some fantastic racing at the end. I'm going to take you through the whole weekend, from testing to not crossing the finish line at the final race, and the surprising reason why. I'll give you some analysis of my driving, my racing decisions, showing you all of the best bits. So, let's get started. Testing is always a very productive day, as it's the most track time you'll get all weekend. I also had the opportunity to drive the car in the wet for the first time, and watching the footage back and seeing how I searched for grip was so interesting. I'm going to make a whole video dedicated to wet driving and helping you with your technique. So if that's something you're interested to see, please like this video and subscribe. Now you can see and hear from these onboards. The gearbox is a tad crunchy at this stage. That will become more relevant later on.
Qualifying CARC Classic Touring Car Championship.
The race weekend officially starts on Saturday with a qualifying session. It's a 15-minute session, and when one lap of the Silverstone GP circuit takes you 3 whole minutes, you don't have many chances. I started off strong, faster than many cars in the classes above me, and then this happened.
I've just killed the gearbox.
I did the same as what I'd done all weekend, but this time the gearbox was particularly unhappy with me. I tried for 4th twice and then tried for 3rd, and it felt like it went into gear at the gear stick end, but nothing was there. I later found out that the main selector shaft had broken, and so had the fork. Just as I thought,
It's all over.
James Ibbotson arrived. The Imp drifting specialist lent me a spare gearbox from a standard Imp and fitted it in just over 2 hours thanks to the Imp's genius design, where the back panel comes off and the engine slides out on top of a jack. Although the ratios made it tricky in such a high lift cam engine, it got me back out in time not to miss a single session, so a huge thanks to the reigning Imp champion. Next up was race 1, my first ever race start. The heavens opened just before we went onto the assembly bay, so we decided to take a gamble on tyres and be the only one on the grid on wets. Unfortunately, a quickly drying track made this a mistake, although it would not be what ultimately slowed me down during the race. The throttle sticking wide open did that. So before we start talking about the throttle cable, I thought I'd talk you through my thought process at the start. So because I was not used to the gearbox and honestly wasn't properly ready, I got a poor start off the line, but I go straight back up the inside, make it to the apex and get a good run on the blue car. Then I'm set up nicely to go up the inside of the A40, but it is of course slightly wet offline, so I committed to the move and I get it stuck. Then next up is the Cortina. He runs wide, I take the apex, lots of curve, and manage to go round the outside to dive up the inside. The good old flip-flop. As it's my first race start, I'm trying to keep out of trouble and make my moves as clean as possible, so I get a half decent run down the straight, but not good enough really to make a move on the cars in front. By the time it was race 2, I'm more than happy to go in from this distance at this corner, but race 1 I was just playing it safe. This was my first real battle in a car, so I don't commit to the move on the BMW in front, but going down into the next braking zone, with how light the Imp is, it's so strong on the brakes, so I choose to get him here. Again, not fully committing to the move as I'm on the wet line, and then he squeezes me to the inside and there's a bit of dirt, as you can see on the floor there, and I don't get the power down to go around the outside, and he holds onto the position. At the next corner he defends, so I move to the inside to try and force him to take a tighter line and compromise his exit, but he doesn't fall for it and I end up remaining behind. A safety car later in the lap and the wet tyres overheating in the dry meant that this was pretty much where I stopped being competitive, and then of course the throttle cable got worse. Have a listen to this. The cause was a frayed cable at the pedal end, which meant that at the start of the race it was manageable, but the more I pressed and released the pedal, the worse it got. For a period of time, it was like an auto rev matching feature. I didn't have to heel and toe as it did it all for me. But then it got much worse, and I was forced to stay in 3rd for the last few laps of the race. Every time I tried to change gear, the revs would quickly rise, making it hard to get it into the next gear, and I didn't want to ruin my engine and the gearbox I'd just been lent. This, however, was a simple fix for race 2 on Sunday. Race 2 was was everything I hoped it would be. For the first half. Anyway, despite not being used to the gearbox, I got a good start, made a few moves, got to grips with the other drivers and racing in a pack. Something felt strangely alien from karts to cars. I suppose it's because rubbing paint in a kart happens every session and you whack a new sticker on, but I just spent a few months preparing and polishing my car, as you can see in another video. One aspect that felt surprisingly surreal was all the other cars. These are cars that I didn't grow up with, neither did my parents, and they weren't talked about or on my radar at all. So to me, it felt like racing side by side with the mythical Lotus Cortina or the lesser spotted Ford Anglia 105e, a very cool experience. Now I'll talk you through my thought process during the race. This time I was much more ready, I had the revs high and I was ready to go and knew what to expect with the clutch. So I moved straight to the inside, being in a low power car, want to defend my position straight away and have the opportunity to overtake. The Cortina goes straight away and I'm maintaining my inside line. The car in front gets a little wiggle on, so I hesitate, but then I'm straight back on the power and sticking to my guns. You can see that there is a wet line offline and it's dry online, which makes some really committed and interesting racing. Here I go to the outside, but I don't think it's the right option, so I back out and let other people go. The Mini I thought was actually going to run wide, but he didn't. I was hoping to pick up the pieces. Then I'm straight on his tail and the Cortina's also got by. So now I'm trying to stick to the dry line, be really smooth and make sure I get a good exit down the straight. The other cars get away from me down the straight, but I move over onto the dry line and utilise the Imp's superpower, braking and mid-corner speed. I dive straight up the inside of the Cortina, get on the curb, make sure I'm hogging the dry line, and then I run out wide and he's got nowhere to go. I've also now got the inside for the next corner. Being wet on the inside, this is a bit of a risky move in a heavy braking zone, but I managed to get the car stopped. Again, using the curb, which is dried out and is a grippy concrete, I give him room on the inside of the next corner, but he doesn't have the pace to stick it back up the inside. The next move comes from sheer power, unusual for the Imp, but I get a good exit, pull alongside, and the move is done. Now you see me defending that position, just moving to the inside and letting the person behind know, I know you're there, don't try anything. Again defending into this section and everyone is a bit offline. Now as I defend into the left unexpectedly, the Mini opens up his line massively and I think I'll have a go. And we get quite close on the exit, he pinches me and then the car bogs down and I don't get the run I was hoping for. Clever driving from the Mini and he outpowers me down the straight. Now I'm coming up to the BMW, I get a good run alongside just towards the end of the straight and outbrake him. I make it to the apex, but all the time he's still around the outside. I have the option to try and go back around the outside of him, but with a wet track offline, it's better to yield early. Now I have a chance at him going into Maggers. I go up the inside for the left, and then on the wet patch around the outside for my favourite move of the weekend, and for a minute I thought I was going to get the Mini too. The Mini then takes a really radical line and doesn't quite make his turning point, and then I'm back alongside. Unfortunately, I just didn't quite have the power to stay with him. And now comes the mistake that cost me a chance at the Mini in future. I lifted the clutch up too sharply, locked the rear wheels, bit offline, bit Yankee on the wheel. Combination of things led to that slide. So then the rest of the race I had a fantastic battle with that Ford Escort you just saw beside me, and I spent most of the time defending from him. But now there were other people on my tail. We went 3 wide into this left-hander, me and the Cortina squeezed the other car out the middle, and then I slotted in beside the Cortina round the outside where I didn't want to be. And this shows because he squeezed me out onto the curb as he has the right to do, and I didn't get a good exit bogging down in that long third gear. And then it all came to a pretty swift stop when just here I noticed the water temp rising and it was not coming down. At this point I looked for a marshal's post and headed straight there. Luckily I met my usual crew who towed me back to the garage once again. What we saw when I got back I don't believe. We'd managed to remove the whole engine and gearbox, swap the gearbox, refit everything, basically the whole drivetrain system, and what failed us in the end was a Jubilee clip to a water hose. draining the coolant and leading the temperature to rise. It's always the simple things. Overall, a very challenging but rewarding weekend, and I have to thank James Ibbotson again for making sure it didn't end early. Check out his YouTube channel in the description, and if you enjoyed this video and want to see more content like it, please like and subscribe, and let me know in the comments what you want to see from future race weekends. Watch this video next to see how I prepared the car, although not very well it seems.